Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us live and thank you for watching this replay. I am very grateful and honored to have a very special person today to talk about our last topic for this masterclass series, focusing on mental health. And the inspiration for this is finding joy despite challenges. And I want to thank all our speakers for the entire series, Amanda, Katie, Roxy, Paula Jane, Barbara, who's here with us today, um, Katie, and I hope I didn't miss anybody. That's 7 speakers. And of course, Michelle. And today to talk about grief, um, the journey of grief and joy, is Dr. Michele Mariscal. Michelle has 30 years of experience in the health and wellness field. She is a coach, author, and facilitator in soft skills, personality, communication, and resilience. As an advanced grief recovery method specialist, she helps people process challenging emotions of grief, anxiety, and loss. Clients can work with her in one-to-one format or in small groups. The Grief Recovery Method is the first evidence-based program for grief and provides the right tools for people to complete their relationship to pain brought on by a significant emotional loss. Michelle also coaches individuals and groups, as well as corporate audiences in the resilience tools and technology from the Institute of HeartMath. She is a 5-time author, and her most recent publication is Growing Through Grief: The Alchemy of Healing from Loss, which is available in Amazon.com. So today, I want to welcome Dr. Michelle. Thank you so much for hosting this masterclass today.
Hi, hi. Yeah, I'm so happy and grateful really for the series. I personally have enjoyed watching and hearing and learning from the speakers. And as you said, the building of each topic on the other. And I found Dr. Amy last week did such a great segue to mine because she really introduces what I'm talking about, how what grief and joy, sometimes in our darkest times it's hard to even imagine that word joy, let alone being able to experience both. But as Dr. Amy shared last week, we can experience those two emotions simultaneously. And I this topic of joy has always been near and dear to me because it was kind of a turning point for me in my own deep grief. And what I'd like to do is just read a part from my book that kind of describes how that joy piece even started to be a flicker. There may come a day, as it did for me after months and months of going back into despondent, sad days, when you just decide, I don't want to feel like this today. I remember the day this happened to me clearly. I was sitting on my couch back in one of my moods in which I did not want to do anything. I lived right by the river, and even putting on my tennis shoes to go for a walk didn't sound appealing. I felt like I had developed some kind of anxiety that made it impossible to make a decision. I was tired of that too, as it was often this low level anxiety that would take me right into non action and deciding not to do anything or to go anywhere. This just compounded my mood and made me sadder. On some logical, conscious level, I knew I was just making things worse, but I felt that I could not make the choice to do anything. So I was sitting on my couch, feeling that kind of low level anxiety that had kept me from taking any action, which led to that familiar sadness and lethargy. I turned my head to the right, as if that was some action in itself, and heard somewhere in myself I don't want to feel this way today. And that part of me rose up again. And this time it said, I choose joy. So that's my connection to this topic. When I heard myself say, I choose joy, I got up off the couch and decided to go out and put gas in my car. Once I was in that direction, I decided to continue that familiar route, which usually included a trip to Whole Foods. I bought a couple of things and went right back home. It may seem like such a simple thing, but pay attention to the small actions you take and how you feel about taking them. It may be a baby step, but acknowledge in yourself that you took one small step. These small steps are what begin to pave the way for greater action and being able to get to that place where you can experience joy and sadness or other emotions like that. So let's take a look now at how those of us who may be in that deep, dark place, that joy isn't even a light at an end of a tunnel. Let's see what makes that hard. So, one of the things societally that we do is make it very challenging for grievers to actually grieve. And how that happens is through some of these different myths and just misconceptions about grief and being able to express grief. So, what we know as a definition for grief is that grief is normal and natural as a reaction to loss of any kind. And often, what makes it challenging to express our grief is that we're not normal and natural about grief in our society. So, some of the myths, a couple of them that I wanted to talk about today, one is don't feel bad, and the other is replace the loss. And those two go hand in hand, and they may have been modeled to you from the time you were 2 or 3 years old, if you have a memory from that place and time. Oftentimes, pet loss is the first kind of loss that kids might experience. And so often, well meaning parents will just say something like, it's okay, honey, we'll go get you another dog on the weekend. And again, as parents, as anyone caring for children, we don't want to see them hurt or hurting. But what we want to realize is that normalizing grief and allowing those feelings to occur and teaching children from the get-go that this is normal and natural to be sad. Tell me about your doggy. What will you remember about him or her? What will you miss? Allowing children to talk. So fast forward all these years, if we've been operating under this myth, don't feel bad, replace the loss, when we start to sustain our own losses and hear things from people that are part of this myth making, it makes it challenging to stay engaged in our own process with our own emotions. One of the most painful things that someone said to me as I think a supportive comment after my little brother died in 1993 was, you still have two brothers. And while that may be true, it completely dismissed my experience of my feeling so lost without my brother. So I thought I would invite if anyone would like to share, if that's kind of bringing kind of an aha for you, where you might see that or both of those myths in play in our culture.
Anyone? Denise, I see you reaching for that microphone.
Let's see. Yeah, you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
So for myself, when I had a miscarriage and my father and mother had my daughter, because I was in the hospital, and I called back to my parents, and house as my husband was driving home, and I told my dad, who never answered the phone, and I said, Dad, I lost the baby. And he said, well, you still have Candy, which was my firstborn, and she was 2. And I thought, okay, you know, but I didn't realize for a long time that he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was just factual, intellectual, letting me know, well, you already have one, like it's
Mm.
okay. But there was no way that she replaced the loss of the child that I was, about to have, thinking about, already realizing how much time would be between the one that I had and the next one. So it really did not touch my heart. And it kind of, in my head, I was like, well, that was not helpful, but I didn't say that. So, yeah, that was kind of rough. One child does not replace the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Denise. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's so uncomfortable, no matter the age or the situation, that there's that discomfort of not knowing what to say or what to do, or even to not say or do anything and hold that space. We don't know how to do that. And because it's already so just so uncomfortable, it compounds that feeling or need or trying to help, but you really don't have the tools or the modeling or any of it. So
Mhm.
yeah, because every situation I'm thinking about, I'm like, yeah, just being there for someone, what does that look like? And everybody's different too. So holding space for somebody may not be comforting for them.
Mhm. Yes, yes, knowing our people and really being able to what we call it in the work I do is listening as a heart with ears. And again, that's I think a thing in our culture that is very different and challenging if we're used to conversing in a way that we're we're ready with our question to clarify, we're ready with a suggestion, we're ready with advice, again, all from well-meaning places. But that's the kind of thing that can stop a griever from sharing, from really getting to have the freedom to express those emotions. So, yes, Barbara, that's a great point. And I'll share with you one of the greatest things one of my coworkers said to me when I returned back to work was, Michele, I'm here if you feel like you'd like to talk. And I'm also here if you don't feel like talking. And I thought, wow, that was the perfect thing. Just perfect because I felt safe with him, knowing that I could be kind of in my quiet place and that would be okay, and that he was there and I could share freely. He was one of my, we might call those safe people. I think each of us have this experience when we are out and we may have some of these comments coming to us. It can be very isolating, but we get to know very quickly who what we might consider a safe person. And that safe person is someone that you can move through your feelings and express them, knowing that there's not going to be questions or suggestions coming. So that's one of the things I would offer as a take home from this class is really start practicing that. Listening as a heart with ears. See how that is for you to put that into practice and start recognizing the degree to which you might be always in a conversation ready to volley back. You're ready with the next volley, and how often we do that. So the more you can practice being a heart with ears, it may actually be uncomfortable for the receiver of it because again, we're not used to that present quiet listening and no expectation of anything coming back. Um, but it is what grievers need. And we always like to talk about grievers don't need to be fixed. We're not broken. We just need to be heard. So grievers don't need to be fixed. And the reason I like to always keep that top of mind is that because I do tend to be a person who lives in my thoughts. And I am the first one in a conversation to try to be helpfully ready with a comment. So this listening as a heart with ears, it's a practice. So let's move on to then what creates unresolved grief. Again, another thing that might keep us blocked from being able to feel joy and sadness at the same time. So unresolved grief can be related to a couple different things. It can be things that we wish we had said or done differently, better, or more of. And it can also be related to all those unmet and now unrealized hopes, dreams, and expectations for the future. So all of those things can be maybe regrets, memories that come up that really kind of keep us trapped in that sense of not having been able to discover and process what all those emotional communications might be. And those are some of the action steps that are required at the end of that little piece of reading. Before I even had found the grief recovery method that I do, I recognized for myself that sense of it's baby steps, it's the correct action steps that move us in this direction to be able to claim joy, claim the possibility. Maybe we can't feel it at the moment, but the possibility of it. One of the things I also wanted to comment on about happiness versus joy is happiness really is kind of this momentary, fleeting, little bit of a dopamine rush kind of experience. Joy has this much more abiding, present sense to it. And the way I'll give you examples of how, when we've done our grief recovery work, how that looks, but just in the sense of how do I feel or know joy? I can go out and just sit by the water and have this just enduring sense of joy, even if I'm not having such a great day and I am feeling sad. So there can be places and spaces and experiences that we know we feel this connection to this human birthright called joy. It's kind of more of an abiding feeling, not a jolting. I'm happy. Now I'm sad. Happy. All right. So we talked about what creates unresolved grief. And through grief recovery, and taking those action steps, that really is where we can begin to see that possibility of experiencing sadness and joy simultaneously. Before I read from my book, I wanted to also bring you one of my favorite, most inspiring poets, David White. He has some amazing soul-stirring poetry. And The Well of Grief is a piece that I have often gone to in my different times of grief because it's such a good reminder that really the only way to the other side is through. The only way out is through. The only way out is through. So we want to recognize that allowing ourselves to have these feelings are normal and natural. It may not feel good. We may not want to particularly be feeling them, but it is a part of who we are as humans, this whole continuum of emotions. So this is The Well of Grief by David White. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small, round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. Thank you, David White. So those small round coins that he talks about in there, those are really those points of wisdom that we get. You know, when I always say the journey of grief has its gifts if we're paying attention. And so I want to read just the part in my book that this was a part where I was remembering that larger part of the journey. Like, I am a human here, and I know I came to do something. Right now, I'm in so much suffering, I can't even feel that. But this remembering that sort of is a part of that joy, that's connected to that joy in us, it's always there. So this was when I was writing about that part in the book. There was a deeper need that arose from the sadness this time, and it felt much more existential and needy in me. This time, it was about my own destiny, the fulfillment of my life. Each time a loss occurs, the question of who am I comes up. Having barely processed the loss of my dad and the feeling of being rootless, the loss of my big brother compounded the attempt to identify myself. With each loss, it is necessary to see the beauty of the work that was done in relationship with that person, and then to take in the gifts and fullness of whatever that life brought and begin the work of identifying and growing into the person you are now without the other. So bringing that back to our work of grief recovery, that really is the process, having the correct steps to take action with, to discover all of those undelivered communications to that person. And each of our relationships are unique. Each one of our losses are unique and individual. So being able to recognize that and give the fullness of your grief in that experience. One of the things we find is oftentimes with pet loss, people will tend to dismiss it as not as bad as my friend whose son committed suicide. And it's really important that we each allow ourselves to recognize our own grieving experiences and not diminish what we're feeling. Find those ways in which we can process, be with those emotions and process. And in that way, we move to this place when we've done grief recovery to memories that might come up that are sad, but we don't go all the way down that dark alley. That's the way I used to describe it to myself. We don't go down the dark alley. And just behind that little sad memory comes a memory of happiness, of joy, of gratitude. And so we can find that ability to be in that experience. And I recently, it was a couple weeks ago now on Memorial Day. Hold on, I need to cough. Excuse me. So during Memorial Day, I got in a mood to make a pie. And I don't bake a lot. It's super hot here in Florida, and turning on the oven is, whew, gotta be ready for that. But I do have these occasions when I feel like baking. And making a pie crust from scratch was one of the things that I remember most from being in the kitchen with my mom. It's one of my just, oh, so sweet memories because it took a long time. I must have thrown 3 pie crusts out because I kept mashing it too hard, or I was just making the dough too hard before I started. And my mom just kept being so patient with me. So being able all these years later to still make pie crust from scratch is one of my greatest memories of her. So it was Memorial Day. I was going to make an apple pie. And in that making of it, I pull out her cookbook, and there's just a little momentary sad, like, oh, Mom, I wish I could call you and tell you that I'm making this pie. So there was that, and I acknowledged it, and I was with Mom in that. And as soon as I started making the pie crust and rolling it out, I had this feeling like I was rolling out Mom's love into that pie crust. And so that was the part of joy that this. So when you look at this sadness and this joy, like in the same experience, I was missing Mom, and I was so loving that this was such a great memory, and that my neighbors loved the pie, and all of those really goody good things. And so in that last piece that I read, when we lose someone, we want to be able to look at all those undelivered communications so that we can let go of the pain of the attachment, any attachment to that isolation or the loneliness, or just any attachment to the pain. And then in that way, we're able to have these experiences of joy and sadness. So I thought I would open it up and just see if some of you may have a thought or a memory of being able to experience that simultaneous sadness and joy.
I have a question, if I
Sure.
could. So, and this isn't really in line with what you just talked about, but it's been on my mind when you mentioned before, what if we're uncomfortable and we don't know how to really, like maybe we don't even know that person that well, but we want to express our condolences, sympathy, but not just to use those words, but yet not in a position of saying, I'm here for you. Like, so there's that space too, where, for example, my dear yoga teacher, Guru Singh, who passed away a few years ago, and there's a whole community, and we held a vigil every single week for a year, and his wife was in such pain, and I knew her, but I didn't feel like I was uncomfortable, right? One, I was doing my own grieving, but also I didn't know how to be, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know where to be with her. So if you could just kind of talk about like what you recommend when, because you've shared a lot of great tips and ideas and with our own grief as well as somebody else and how to be there. But what about this in-between space where it's a mutual, right? But somebody else, it's their husband or it's their child or it's somebody really, really close. And they're yet, right? We all have you were saying we all have these different relationships and every single one is unique. And like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I should have taken some notes, several thoughts. One thing that occurs for me is that this speaking with this person in particular about a good memory that you have with this lost loved one to them is one of the ways. And I did want to address sometimes we truly don't know what to say. And that is absolutely an okay thing to say. You can just, again, if we go into that presence of being a heart with ears and being with that person and saying, I just really don't have words to say. I want you to know I'm here. I care. Just expressing this caring, compassionate nature. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there was another thought I had too. Um,
Yeah. And even with her, I found that I would share memories and it would trigger stories and then, right, the stories. And then the stories, I mean, she would share the same story. That would happen too, right? People, when they do share, they sometimes repeat. And,
mhm,
and just being in a place of listening to that again,
mhm.
right? Or expounding upon it if it's appropriate.
Yes, yes. I always talk about the mental body. I speak of us as we have four bodies. We have the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. And when we are so in the throes of these overwhelming emotions, it's kind of like that part of us has just stepped forward and is needing to be heard. And it's like the mental body of us kind of takes a back burner. And that's literally making simple decisions like, I don't know whether to have chili or a piece of salmon for dinner. Like the challenge of any decision can feel very challenging um, in the deep of grief, and just allowing, as others supporting someone, knowing that that mental capacity is really kind of turned around, turned upside down. It's very hard. And some of the things I recommend too is we need to just stop saying, "How are you?" to a griever. That can feel like one of the most loaded and unsafe things to say, because there's an answer being waited for, and I'm over here like I'm having a day. No, I don't. If I say this, if they go that direction, like it's just so overloading. This wide open, how are you? So better to be very uh, just more directional. Like if you know of something they were engaged with, how did that go this morning? Or something that an answer can be right there and it not feel like a strain to, and if they want to go more into what's happening for them, they may, but they have the option if you've asked them about something um, that's concrete, direct, in, that they can give some words to. It's also helpful to, instead of just an open, let me know how I can help. There's, again, that's, uh, there's so much I need and I couldn't even, so if you are the person supporting someone, just kind of check in. We know our close people. If we're supporting someone not as close, maybe forming some support teams and see what needs this person may have, what things might be really most helpful, and offer a very direct thing. Hey, can I pick up your mail for you at the mailbox? Whatever it is, if there's just certain things that you recognize, just be very uh, clear and directional with it. These wide open questions can be very, very challenging for someone just trying to put tennis shoes on to go out the door, that kind of thing. So anything that we can be helpful with in baby steps, like things that we notice that might help.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Because I'm the person who don't know how to, like Barbara, express that condolences in other way than saying I'm sorry for your loss. But I was pondering about a question about being happy or finding joy in grief, and at first I couldn't think of anything because I haven't lost a immediate family, and then I started thinking about my aunts who I lost during COVID, and I was close to her, and I remember the day after I learned about her passing, I just walked outside and I was talking to her in my mind, like the spiritual level. And then a dog um, came to me, and I wasn't that. I'm not the type who I'm not a dog person. Let's just say that. But this particular dog just jumped right at me and is so happy to see me, as if, and I realized maybe that's my aunt saying hi, hello. And then I was just thinking about her as I was walking. And then I saw a kind of an altar, Barbara. It's like somebody made a stone, um, an aunt,
Wow.
whatever. Maybe they're just playing with it. And then there's flowers. And I just felt connected with her that way. So I guess that's how I process grief. And then when I thought about that, oh yeah, that's how I felt with my other aunt who passed. Like I'm just really connecting with them directly in their soul spiritual level and saying thank you for the memories, for helping us when we were young, things like that. And I remember the joy instead of grief. I'm not really sad that they're gone because I understand the reason why they're gone. So I am more grateful for the memories. And that's how I find joy in grief.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, yes. Each of those relationships, the thing that is true is we always have that relationship. That's a part of who we are, and all that that person brought to us. That's always a part of what we have. And so sometimes in our work together, when I work with people, this idea of if I do this work, I'm going to lose my connection to them, or it will feel like I'm forgetting them. So there can be a lot of fear in taking those steps to really be with some of those undelivered communications and those unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations. But I'm here to say that it's possible to say goodbye to those hard parts and the challenging parts of grief that have caused isolation and sadness and loneliness, and have that really clear and clean relationship. So yeah, thank you for sharing those examples. Yeah, Denise.
Before we got on that subject, you were talking about the joy and grief together. And back in 2004, one of my friends died, and she was in her late 30s. And she left behind her husband and a 12-year-old son. So when I went to his wedding years later, when he was in his 20s, it was very hard because my heart was sad that she was not here to see this. And there were some pictures of her and him when he was a baby and a little bit older. So it was very hard to go over to the table because my heart still misses her. I still see her husband. He was in our wedding. I met him in the 4th grade. He and his son are still a part of our life, but she's still missing, and she will always be missing. However, like I could have sorrow, but I could have joy at the same time, because here I am celebrating his wedding, which is a very joyful occasion, but she is not present. So it had that little bit of like, so it was painful, but it was also joyful. So I just share that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think these ideas, these concepts, these suggestions that I've made, I invite you to really stay in awareness of some of what you learned, not only for yourself to hear where some of the ways in which it may be hard for you when you are experiencing loss, and then also recognizing how we can start to change our culture and how we support each other in grief by, again, practicing some of these things that we talked about today. So I wish you all joy in your grief. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle, for this very informative and touching. I was touched by their stories that everyone shared today. So, if there's anyone who needs support in their grief, where can they reach you?
They can find me at energym.org, energym.org. Yeah, and I teach both group online classes, they're 8-week classes in grief recovery, and then 7-week one-on-one work with people. Yep.
Thank you.
All
Thank
of
you
the books are on her website too.
Yes.
All of the books, and yeah, there's a lot of great
Yes.
resources.
Free
Yes. So
ebooks. Yeah, I think.
follow, check the website, check the book, and buy it in Amazon or directly from your website, correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. And
Thank
I
you so
gave you the
much.
links. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yes.
Kelly. Thanks,
Yeah,
Michelle.
booker there. Thank you so much for joining us live today. And for those who are watching again, gratitude to everyone, especially the wellness experts in this masterclass series on mental health. Shout out to Amanda, Paula Jane, Roxy, Katie, Dr. Amy, Barbara, and Michelle. I am so grateful and honored for your time and talent that you shared with us here at happyme.yoga. Until
Yeah.
our next
Kelly.
series, maybe
Thank
in
you, Kelly.
person or workshop in person or online. I'll see you then. Take care and be well.
Okay.
Bye everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.